Thank you. If the previous award was made to someone who was located quite far off from us, this next award, it's my privilege and my honor to award to someone who's quite close at hand, and that is to my colleague, Carl Erhlich, Professor of History and Humanities at York University. The award is for the book Choices Under Duress of the Holocaust, Benjamin Murmelstein and the Fate of Viennese Jewry, and it's the first volume in what will be a multi-volume publication. And it's a book that was worked on for many years by Professor Ehrlich's parents, Leonard Ehrlich and Edith Ehrlich, and then brought to fruition by Carl himself, edited by Carl. The jury was impressed by the meticulous and in-depth research of Choices Under Duress and by the important issues that it addressed. The book probes the nature of choices in unspeakable circumstances, what the distinguished scholar of Holocaust literature, Lawrence Langer, refers to as choiceless choices. The book emerges from a very ambitious project by Edith and Leonard Ehrlich, encompassing documentary research, personal interviews, their own engagement, and it was, as I said, brought to fruition by their son, Carl Ehrlich. Choices of Duress not only maps out a significant history, but in doing so, it explores important and difficult philosophical and ethical questions. I am delighted to make this award on behalf of the jury to my colleague and friend, Carl Ehrlich.
Thank you very much, Sara. Thanks also to the jury that has selected this book for this great honor. And thanks especially to Edward Trapunski, who convinced me against my normal nature to submit this volume for prize consideration. This is a great honor, not so much for me, but much more importantly for my late parents, who spent over 30 years on this project. When my parents undertook this task, I was a teenager. By the time the draft was completed, I was in my early to mid-50s. Although my scholarly parents published many other works during their years of labor on choices under the duress of the Holocaust, it was this project that they viewed as their most important and to which they always returned. What they originally set out to do was to investigate from a philosophical perspective the choices that the Jewish leadership under Nazi domination made. Taking as their test case that of Rabbi Dr. Benjamin Murmelstein, the last surviving Judenältester, or Jewish elder, whom my father remembered from his childhood in Vienna. Indeed, Murmelstein was the rabbi at his bar mitzvah, and whom I actually had the opportunity to meet when I did a backpacking tour through Europe in 1980. My parents quickly realized that they would need to contextualize their philosophical musings within a broader historical context in order to offer a fair assessment of the decision-making process available to Jewish leaders during those terrible years under Nazism. In order to do so, they minutely investigated the history of the Jewish community of Vienna and its fate, both of those Jews in Vienna itself and of those interned at the model ghetto of Theresienstadt or Terezin. The actions of the Jewish leadership under Nazi domination have oftentimes been questioned in the post-war period. However, as my parents painstakingly document, an examination of the evidence makes their actions appear much more nuanced and not as open to condemnation as first thought. While my parents had hoped to live long enough to see the publication of their magnum opus, neither of them was able to do so. One somewhat tardy expression of their desire to disseminate this work in a swifter manner, that still managed to meet with my mother's approval was the decision to publish the work in 2 volumes, not to appear simultaneously, but as you have heard, consecutively. Thus, this first volume that is being honored here today, focusing on Vienna, has appeared before the second, encompassing Theresienstadt and the philosophical final section, the latter of which represents the aim and culmination of their massive study, which took such a great personal toll on my refugee parents. If I may quote a few lines from the end of their introductory chapter. Writing this book, we could not help but visualize the fate of friends, relatives, and other persons whom we had known in our young years in Vienna. While we were not able to dispel the visions that haunted us, we believe that we have succeeded in keeping our personal involvement with the topic out of our book. Nevertheless, we decided that a few pages of this book need to reflect the personal note, if for no other reason than as a reminder that the duress was suffered by beings of flesh and blood. We did this by adding at the end of the book, and the reference here is to the end of the second volume, which is not yet published, a few personal lasting impressions, and by interspersing in the body of the book a few notes about people we had known and what happened to them, end quote. It is nearly 9 years since the draft manuscript was completed. In the interim, both my parents have passed away without the pleasure of seeing their magnum opus in print. While this was unfortunately inevitable in the case of my father, in that of my mother, it was due to my slow progress in preparing the manuscript for publication. Nonetheless, in finally delivering this first volume, I can only echo the hope expressed in the closing words of the biblical book of Nehemiah or Nehemiah, Zochali Elohai Letova, O my God, remember it to my credit. And here I would like to depart for a second from my remarks, which originally ended at this point, and point out that because my parents unfortunately can't be here today, I'm wearing my father's cufflinks, and also here in my pocket, the gold watch that I inherited from my father the last time I saw him, and that he would wear at every significant family event, whether bar mitzvah, wedding, funeral, whatever. He had inherited this gold watch from his father, who received it from his future father-in-law as an engagement present when my grandfather became engaged to my grandmother. When my grandparents got married, exactly 100 years ago this month, my great-grandfather had just passed away. But because in Judaism, joy takes precedence over mourning, they got married at that time anyway. Unfortunately, if one can speak in binary terms, as a male, I don't have anything to wear of my mother's. However, that being said, my sister, Dr. Karen Adelman, who helped ensure that my parents would live long enough to finish the manuscript of this book, is sitting over there, and I trust, yes, she's holding up that she is wearing my mother's necklace. So my parents are both here in spirit, if not in actuality. Thank you very much.